So next up on our list is going to be Lady Margot Fenring. Now, this is the leader that Jimmy Donaldson played in the Uprising Invitational Finals. It was very interesting as well. I believe Paul got to obviously chat with Jimmy about why he chose Margot. And Jimmy simply said that he felt that this was the leader he was least likely to make a mistake with. And you know what? I think he's right. Margot Fenring's, I think, advantage is that she is incredibly straightforward and simple to use. There's nothing particularly fancy about it. It's just solid, simple, fundamental stuff that's good to go for and is going to help you in the mid to late game for sure. Fenring's passive is very similar to Irulan's passive in that you get to influence, in this case with the Bene Gesserit, obviously makes sense with Fenring, you get hold of 2 spies. This is pretty good, you know. You're basically, this is paying for espionage hits. This is obviously finding use for paying for other trips to other factions, stuff like that. This is not too bad. And again, much like similar to Irulan, this is repeatable. You can drop down and go back up and reacquire this benefit. I think that happened maybe a little bit less often than Irulan's Birthright, but that's just me. Then we get to Arrakis Informant, and again, nice and straightforward. If you use your ring, you get to put a spy on a city space. So spies were the feature for the third design diary for Dune Imperium Uprising. If you want a more detailed explanation of how exactly they work, I would definitely encourage you to go and look at that. And again, there was a lot of talk about how things work. But spies basically replace the old infiltrate mechanic from Helena and all of the intrigues as well. There are these icons you can get hold of on board spaces, on cards, and bits and pieces like that, which will let you get to these infiltration areas, these observation posts. And when you have one of your spies located on these locations, it will allow you guaranteed access, assuming you can pay for the cost and influence and such, to the areas next to it. You can infiltrate if someone's gone there, it consumes a spy. You can also optionally go there when no one's there and draw a card. They are very effective, and they are mainly gained at the espionage ability, but there's some other ways of getting hold of those as well, as noticed obviously with Margot Fenring, and a couple other cards here as well. Now, spies are definitely very strong for a variety of reasons. Being able to know that you have guaranteed access to a space is very big in Dune Imperium. For anyone that has played games of Dune Imperium and people have got like the voice card, for example, which is like blocking areas that you can't plan for, that can cause all manner of difficulties for players and that sort of thing. So being able to guarantee your access there is obviously very big. It's why cards like Web of Power and Choam Delegate, even something sort of like the Imperial, the Emperor one that lets you infiltrate, Court Intrigue, stuff like that. When you've got guarantees on being able to go somewhere, it takes a lot of pressure off of your actions and it gives you a lot more freedom being able to plan however you so want to. Spies also have other uses as well. They have uses for intrigues as well. Yeah, Special Mission is another way of being able to detonate the shield wall. Spring the Trap, probably one of the strongest intrigues in the game. 2 spies lifting them off the board for 7 swords is enormous potential to do a ton of damage. And there are also a variety of cards as well that when you recall spies give you bonuses, like the Imperial Spy Master. Public Spectacle, giving a wild bump. Very strong card in Public Spectacle. Probably one of the better cards in the game, and stuff like that as well. But talking about Fenring's ability in particular, what spaces can you actually put spies on the board for blue spaces? Well, there are only 3 available in the game, and that is between here, here, and here, as there are 4 city locations on the board. Now, where you're going to want to send your spies as Fenring, or anyone in particular, to city spaces, obviously it's going to depend a lot on what you're attempting to do for the game. And also kind of probably depends a lot on what stage of the game it can be as well. So early days, you'll be visiting Arakeen and Spice Refinery a lot because you want to either be getting troops into card draws, or you want to be changing spice out for money to get Swordmaster, that sort of thing. And then later on in the game, obviously, you are going to want to visit Siege Tiber because it offers pretty decent rewards and getting your Maker Hooks so you can get worms later on, or Research Station, which is incredibly powerful. I'd actually wager that Research Station is probably the strongest variant we've ever seen in Dune Imperium. 2 water for 2 troops and 2 card draw is very powerful, and is an incredibly potent location to go. So you might think, well, Shadow, maybe you want to put your spy here early so you're getting access to the spaces you need to get to early on, and then later game, maybe spy up here to Siege so you can guarantee to these really powerful spots. And yeah, that's definitely a way around it. but you might opt to do it the other way instead. Maybe as Margot, you feel, well, I'm probably get access to these anyways. I want to put my spy down here super early before anyone else does, because the thing with spies is that once you put a spy down in one of these spots, no one else can. It is locked out for everyone else. There are a couple of ways around this, like always in games. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, once you put a spy down in a particular spot, that is yours, and no one else can go there. And this is very important for stuff like faction, especially. There is only one observation post for each faction, for example. So definitely a strategy in the game can be putting a spy on a faction early. And even if you just don't use it for a while, but just using that as protection, stopping other people be able to use that for card draw. Something you do definitely see a bit in the game is people will go to espionage with a spy location, and then they'll infiltrate espionage, lift the spy to do it, and then put it straight back on and use that as a recycle. So stuff like that definitely to get in the way of that, especially for some cards, the strategy in this game, very, very, very powerful. I think it comes up actually in the final as well. But I would say for Fenring is that while she's probably not particularly remarkable, I think she will be very, very solid. Maybe kind of not too dissimilar to Helena in a way, back in the world of the original Dune Imperium. I don't think quite to the extent that she got. I think there were times where she kind of got a little bit busted because she was able to just infiltrate so much, so reliably, was definitely a bit of an issue. So I think Margot is probably a bit more of a better refined version of that. But I think that Jimmy was 100% right, and there's a reason that he won that game as well. Like, if you play as Margot and you just don't do anything too crazy, she's solid, she gives you dependable access to some powerful spaces later on. Getting to Research Station is a huge way of getting troops in. If you need to go to Siege and guarantee it so you can break the shield wall so you can get worms in maybe later on, that's an option for you as well. You know, it's all about what you do with these spies, and if you can get out of cards that also use spies for recalling for bonus effects, or other cards as well that you do it. There's a card in the game called Spy Network, I believe it was, where if you've got 2 or more spies on the board, you can lift one of them for an intrigue, stuff like that. There's a lot of things you can do with spies other than just getting to spaces, so if you can kind of go all in on that, it gives you a lot of flexibility, and you know you've got a somewhat semi-dependable way of getting these spies down, because that's the thing you'll be careful with spies, is that some cards are very effective for like using spies, but won't generate them. So unless you're playing as Margot, you basically get into espionage to get those spies down a lot of the time, and that can be very difficult, to put it mildly. So next up for us is going to be Feyd-Rautha Harkonnen, the Baron's nephew, I think, and the Beast's younger brother. Feyd-Rautha is a 1-pip leader, although it might not look at it on the face of it, but it's actually nowhere near as complicated as it looks. Feyd-Rautha is pretty cool in that he has some definitely unique stuff going on. He has his personal training track here, which is basically pretty straightforward. Just you start off with a cube, a special cube over here, and every time that you use your ring ability as Feyd-Rautha, you move 1 step to the right on the track. So this is kind of like a little mini Talaxu track in a way, where you can customize Feyd-Rautha's rewards to some degree, and you can kind of pick it however you so desire that you want to use him. So there's definitely 2 themes to Feyd-Rautha's abilities. One is very trash heavy, as you can see on the top, and the bottom side is revolving more around getting hold of spies and a bit of spice. And you keep moving across the track until you get to the end here on the right, where you get a troop and a spy, and that's it. You don't get to repeat the ability. Once you hit the end of the track, that is the end of it for Feyd-Rautha. Now, this then plays into Devious Strength, which is completely unique. I'm pretty sure there is no other leader in Dune Imperium we've ever seen which has the ability to gain swords directly on reveal like this. And again, it's pretty straightforward. You can spend a spy put on the board for +2 swords. This doesn't look like a lot until you think of the opening rounds for the game. And suddenly you realize you're like, oh, that's pretty decent. And yes, it is. It's a very scary to be up against a Feyd-Rautha in a late position. Kind of very similar to the Beast Raban in a way. Because the thing is this is 2 swords that is unstoppable and optional. And Feyd-Rautha doesn't have to do it until his reveal turn, so he will have maximum information on the table before he decides if he's actually going to go ahead and do this or not. And obviously, what you will find is a lot of people, and definitely from my experience, Most games I found Feyd-Rautha, when they first use the ring, will get a spy down. Just because spies are good in either way, whether you use them for devious strength to win some early conflicts, or if you just put the spy down straight away to get to a spot that you want, say like up to the High Councilors, you can guarantee access to Swordmaster a lot quicker. Maybe there's a particular faction you're after very early, stuff like that. Maybe you want to make sure you get access to the shipping spaces in the mid-game. There's a lot of different options for Feyd-Rautha to do that. The top ability of spending a coin to trash, like, looks pretty good, but truthfully, like, you're going to be using your ring in the first 2 rounds. Your money typically is going to be going towards going to a Swordmaster, so I don't think you're going to see this get used a lot. Truthfully, I think most of the time people are going to go for the spy because it obviously plays into the passive as well. Your second stage is a guaranteed trash, and then it's a bit more interesting here later on, whether you take the trash to get to your final ability sooner, or you take a slower route, going for more spies, 2 spies, and then this here as well. I mean, it depends. Like, Feyd-Rautha being able to trash passively, just as part of his general ability, is very strong. It's what makes leaders like Archduke Armand and the like, and like Dispose Facility, the tech that lets you trash from play if you got 6 more of it, or even Irulan to some degree, gives them a lot of really cool versatility, because it means that they can get rid of some of those starting cards nice and early. It's just generally as you play the game, you're having to make a special effort to do so, so you're seeing those power cards you're buying a lot more often. But how good is Feyd-Rautha? I don't know. Outside of Irulan, Feyd-Rautha was the person that I played the most next, just the way it came out for me a few times. I definitely felt like he's very solid. I feel like he's nice and simple. The fact that you have the opportunity to kind of customize... Again, I think most often you're going to go spy first down here, and then once you get here, you kind of got to play a little bit by ear. If you want to get those trashes potentially and get the cold debt down, sure. But getting those spies and the spies to get to here is pretty good. You just got to bear in mind that if you do take the bottom route, you've got to use your ring 5 times. And if a game is only going like 7 or 8 rounds, for example, you might not get all 5 uses of your ring unless you're getting that card cycling going, because obviously if you're taking the bottom route, you're not taking very much trashing, so you're going to have to find other ways to get that. And get into this last spot, you know, that troop and spy towards the end, that is pretty significant, and could be a real game maker or game breaker in the back end of the game. If you need to get somewhere urgently, but it's not got spied, getting to this here so you can get into a last round conflict is obviously very, very significant indeed. But I don't know. Feyd-Rautha, I think, for me, is someone that I think could be pretty decent. But I don't know if he's going to be a world beater, truthfully. I would say that the +2 swords for the spy, and being able to do that round 1 is really significant. It means that if you really want to win an opening conflict, you can do that. It's more about the threat of it, though. Like, if you go to Arakeen, for example, with your Signet Ring, and you put in 3 troops, and you're putting a spy down, it's really hard for anyone to actually challenge you in that conflict, to the point where you might not even need to use Devious Strength, because, like, you know that you can just get those +2 swords. And in round 1, round 2, that's really, really significant. Later on, obviously, this isn't offering a ton. You're going to want to get in your swords for other reasons, either via troops or worms or intrigues. So I do think Devious Strength, as the game goes on, probably will lose a little bit of potency. But those +2 swords, you know, are always useful. But I definitely think in the early to mid-game, that's where you're going to see a lot of strength with Devious. And it's not so much, again, using it, it's the threat of using it that I think is going to be really significant. But I think Feyd-Rautha will still be pretty solid, pretty straightforward. And I think if you're using, especially if you've not played a lot of Dune Imperium, you know, being able to kind of customize your awards and think a little bit ahead about like what you want to do and what's going to benefit you, I think is a nice idea. So I think Feyd-Rautha on a design point, super, super cool. How effective he's going to be when it comes to actually like playing, especially in a more competitive scene, I think remains to be seen, but I can't see him being bad. Alright then, so next up is going to be Gurney Halleck, and this one is going to be interesting to talk about, and I've been very much looking forward to seeing what the responses are for this one. Gurney Halleck is a 1-pip leader, rated pretty straightforward, and you know what? He is pretty straightforward, but that is kind of the beauty of him, I think. Warmaster, his signet ring, is just simply a, well, you could argue it's just a worse version of the Beast ring, and yeah, you're right, it is just a straight 1 troop with your signet ring, rock and roll. But Gurney Halleck, I think, potentially could be the best leader in this game. possibly if used correctly, and that is because of always smiling. This is a very fascinating ability here. For your reveal, if you have 6 or more strength in the conflict, we can not worry about 6-player games, you get +1 persuasion. Now, that doesn't seem like a ton. And on its own, obviously, it's not a lot. But what this is tempting to make you do as this leader is, it's very similar to when I've done commentaries for for matches for Dune Imperium, and I talk about Beast and such. Obviously, you can play him like a very, very war-heavy leader. That's what he's obviously designed to do with his ring: get an alliance, get loads of troops, pump combats, and win fights. But I do sometimes talk about playing Beast Raban as a hybrid leader. And what I mean by that is that obviously you want to use him pretty aggressively in combat, but you also have a fairly heavy deck building component, so that not only are you obviously going for combat, so maybe you're not going absolutely all in for fighting, but you're also trying to do a bit of deck building with him, and you're trying to buy a Spice Must Flow somewhere with the Beast on top of getting that on those combat VPs as well, and kind of like trying to manage that. You definitely don't have to do it with the Beast at all, but I do think that when you can get that off, he's possibly the best leader in the entire game. Gurney is basically telling you to go hybrid. It is telling you, if you go in and you get troops into combat and you start fighting for them, we're going to give you some persuasion on top, because of course the problem you generally have with very combat heavy decks is that when you go combat heavy, you're not getting a lot of persuasion left, because you're going for a lot of swords, you're going for a lot of combat strength, so you can obviously take those down, and that then impacts your deck building. Well, this, of course, is getting you around that. So, Gurney can do both at the same time. And if you want to think about it this way, think of it like using your signet ring to get in enough troops to activate Always Smiling, and basically take your signet ring and put it on your reveal phase. It's like an automatic chair dog for your War Master, getting both sides of the card, and that is obviously incredibly powerful. I do think that there is a potential for this to be kind of misused, in that there is going to be a temptation to just keep going after conflicts to get as much use out of that. And you can't do that. You just can't fight 7-8 combat straight unless you get like very particular types of decks or get incredibly lucky with intrigues, that sort of thing. You just can't really sustain that. So you still got to pick and choose a little bit. But it definitely offsets a lot of the problems of being able to like go into conflict and you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to get hold of that card. Well, now I can do both. And also, when Gurney's around, other players know that you're going to be prone to getting involved in fights, and that is going to make things a little bit difficult for them, because you're always threatening stuff with War Master, because you want to get that to get the troops in to get Always Smiling, because like the downsides of getting involved in the fight is a lot less impacted. One other thing that is also very important to note, and this was detailed on the second Uprising design diary, is the fact that conflicts themselves are of very different nature in Uprising. And they are so well suited to Gurney actually being very repetitive in combat. And the reason for that is because a lot of conflicts in the game give troops as part of their reward. So, for example, for Gurney he could, in theory, get in 3 troops for a conflict, like Arakeen or something, get second place here, so he gets one of those troops back, and then next round, he uses his signet ring with, like, another Arakeen visit, you've got 3 troops again, and you kind of simply recycle the process. Of course, bear in mind that you just need 6 or more strength in the conflict when you on the reveal turn, so this also includes sandworms as well. So if Gurney can War Master to, like, Hagar Basin, for example, well, that's 5 strength already. You just need to find any other strength for whatever reason, be it swords or anything like that, and you're rocking and rolling. So, Gurney definitely has a lot of potential to do a lot of crazy stuff in conflict, and might get a lot of use out of that 1 persuasion as he goes. So, I think anything encouraging you to kind of play that kind of hybrid style is definitely good, because it's very strong, it can be very, very effective, very potent, letting you do a lot of things at the same time that other leaders just simply really struggle to obtain. And of course, just having those extra swords is good and being able to fight because you want to win combats, because everyone at the start of the game gets dealt one of these cards here, which is effectively half a victory point. So if you can win a conflict that is the same icon, that's a bonus victory point for you to score right there, which is obviously also very, very significant. So this is something that I think is definitely going to play a lot of Gurney. It promotes a very aggressive, very in-your-face style, but you're not particularly compromising on your reveal ability as well, so you can still get hold of some decent cards and still definitely cycle a lot. So I think Gurney Halleck, I would say early on from the initial stage, I think is a contender for one of the best leaders potentially in the game, because it's just encouraging you to just be self-sufficient, and if you're getting involved in those conflicts and you're getting like those consistent second places, like you're getting decent rewards for that, and because Gurney, you're able to constantly resupply that and go back into the conflict once again and be a real nuisance to other players, you know, as they're gonna have to expend like a lot more resources containing you than you're effectively having to spend yourself because of this passive troop generation. Like whenever you see stuff like this, do not underestimate it. That +1 troop is deceptively good in the early to mid game.